押すしかないんじゃん。あ、岩があるの、岩。横っ腹が
これでも出すときガリガリですよね。
出せるかい？車で引っ張んないと。
As the sun hoists itself above the lush Hakone mountain pass, the bright ambassadors of morning glisten the crowns of speed freaks. Passing traffic is humbled by this presence of royalty, for these are the kings of the mountain. Embracing the narrow roads of Japan's countryside, Touge is becoming its own culture in the world of motorsports. These tuned-up machines are specifically made to blast through the winding path. Some are sporty, others are heavily modified grocery getters. Instead of slowing down for tight corners, these things slide through them with precise timing, conserving momentum to cut through at insane speeds. The romantic art of Touge dominates these mountainsides throughout the early 90s. At the same time, deeper into the metropolis below, Toaplan is taking the arcade world by bullet storm. Perhaps known better for their incredible shooting games, this dev house already pumped out known classics like Tiger Heli, Zero Wing, and Truxton. But in 1993, they would pave the way for a new subgenre. As legend has it, shmup players have the ability to dodge raindrops during a storm. The reason why starts here. For many Game Center goers, Batsugun is their first taste of hell. A subgenre, affectionately called bullet hell, is widely believed to have its roots in this very game. With more computing power in these newer arcade boards, Toaplan was able to fill the real estate with swarms of bullet patterns and enemies. It's a new type of challenge for anyone who likes shooting games, giving those who play for an inordinate amount of time the gift of dumping on anyone who dares to be less skilled than them. Batsugun has 3 selectable ships per player, each with weapons that level up and screen bombs. They grant temporary relief from the spattering of shots. Reflexes are a must. Mastery requires countless reps. Warmly received by Japanese critics, one would think kickstarting a sensational subgenre would result in financial success, but the fates of bullet hell have a different plan for Toa. The very next year, in 1994, the company went bankrupt. While the specifics on why are not crystal Pepsi clear, many shmup devs say this is around the time when fighting games took over game centers. Shooters are sort of losing their spark. Still, they have a niche, and some of Toaplan's now unemployed veterans want to keep the bullets flying. While many moved on to bigger places like Square and Taito, others started anew. Several offshoot companies were quickly formed by Toaplan alumni. They include the likes of Gazelle, Takumi, Tamsoft, and Cave. It's an acronym, meaning Computer Amusement Visual Entertainment. Batsugan programmer Tsuneki Ikeda had said many of Toaplan's finest talked him into joining Cave.
They wanted to start up this new company, and they influenced me to come over to Cave. There was also the fact that I still really wanted to make shooting games. It was really the only experience I had at the time, so there was no question as to what I would be making.
Cave brought a lot of the Batsugan gang back together. It allowed them to carry on this newly ignited hell torch.
Select your battle.
Like its predecessor, DonPachi has 3 selectable ships and storms of pellets to dodge. What's different is your combat system. If you repeatedly press fire, you shoot normally, but holding the fire button unleashes a more concentrated, powerful shot that also lowers your speed.
More shots!
Level designs lean into this simple new gameplay mechanic. Sometimes the basic shot is best for things like a cloud of grunt ships. The big laser might be better for larger aircraft. You'll also find bullet patterns that are easier to dodge if you let the laser slow you down. This defines the DonPachi franchise, along with Cave's iconic neon pink bullets. And bees. They had some kind of thing for bees. A lot of Japanese sources say DonPachi came to the arcades in May of 1995. This is confirmed in Cave's 17th anniversary history art book. Cave's opener was a smash hit.
More shots!
During the same year, the devs started work on something they have never really done before. A 3D polygonal racing game for home consoles, using Sega's brand new hardware. Such a major shift away from their comfort zone. The shooting game devs are setting out to capture the magic of Touge. With the release date set for fall of '95, this new game idea comes before the initial D manga. It's hitting before this racing style became somewhat mainstream, before it was synonymous with bassy Eurobeat. Some video games of the era attempt to capture the magic of the mighty mountain pass, but many don't necessarily contain the raw nature of Touge. Cave is on a quest to get this done, with Touge King the Spirits, a Sega Saturn exclusive. The codesmiths who crafted this are not known. The game has no credits, but a look at the default high scoreboard shows initials of well-known cave heads. For example, HY could mean Hideyuki Yokoyama, who is said to be the executive producer of this game on Japanese wiki pages. Citation needed. Ken could mean Kenichi Takao, a man who's been at Cave since the beginning. He's also credited in Steep Slope Sliders. For reasons to be revealed at a later point, I can tell you this with certainty. Even though she likely did not work on Touge King the Spirits, LIN means Linda Yamamoto. Emerging from the ashes of a crippling bankruptcy, starting over under a new banner, cutting through the weeds of uncharted hardware for an unfamiliar genre, Cave is out to show the world nothing can stop them now.
1年生5月
The year is probably 1995. There's a chance it might actually be late 1994, but I doubt it. From what I can find, it's not 100% clear why Cave made racing games. At least one of Cave's old head devs, Takashi Ichimura, says he loves cars. Not only does he race in the circuit, he used to race Touge. He said this in an interview in Cave's history book, released back in 2010.
Before I drove at the circuit, long ago I used to race downhill. That was before Initial D was popular, and I was living in Hiroshima at the time, and would race in the hills around there. I don't do it anymore, but I still occasionally get the urge to.
Shmupalations translated the interview, where Ichimura said he did real-life Touge before making video games.
Saying all this probably makes you think I'm some street racer. You often hear that when people get behind the wheel, their personality changes, but I'm also laid back there, too.
But Ichimura joined Cave after DonPachi came out, and in the interview, he says the only Touge game he worked on was the third game in the series, so he likely did not touch this first installment. Still, it seems possible that other Cave devs were also total gearheads. These shooting game masters clearly started Cave as a means to carry on what they couldn't at Toaplan. Most of Cave's mainstay titles are legendary shmups, considered to be some of the very best. Maybe they felt like console racing games would financially support their shmup endeavors, but as history shows, their shmups were more popular, and they stopped making racing games in the early 2000s. My impression is Touge King was, at least in some respects, a passion project. There's just so much attention to detail with the cars, how they handle, the environments you drive in, attempting to mirror this underground subculture of motorsports. I think they just made the game they wanted to make. At least 2 Japanese publications followed the development of Touge King, Sega Saturn Magazine and Saturn Fan. Some official Sega material touched on its development as well through previews. I tried getting in touch with devs, but since Touge King has no credits, I don't even know who they are. I tried tracking down who they could be through the default high scoreboard. Of the few I could suss out, even fewer had contact info online. None responded. Right above a preview for Mahjong Kaigan Monogatari Mahjong Kyo Jidai Sexy Idol Hen, SSM-JP puts out its first article about Touge King in its July 1995 issue. These magazines are usually released about a month or more after they're written, so this 50% progress build is likely from June or possibly May. SSM credits Atlas for making Touge King, with seemingly no mention of Cave. Atlas is the publisher. I'm not sure if Atlas was significantly involved with actually making the game, but they sure are taking the credit here.
I am now the alpha.
It shows some work-in-progress screenshots, saying 7 to 8 cars are planned for the game. As SSM writes, it's about attacking mountain passes down a series of difficult turns. Exciting for car guys. They add 2-player matches will be supported. This article says Touge King was revealed at the Toy Show, which I assume means the 1995 Tokyo Toy Show. I can't find video or pictures of Touge King at the Toy Show. If it really did appear there, this means Touge King was first revealed to the public between June 1st and 4th, 1995. Note the stylization of the magazine layout here. In the background of the Touge King write-up, there's a silhouette of a curvy mountain pass. In the background of the idle Mahjong game, a silhouette of a curvy mountain pass. Fun fact! The horny Mahjong game is being made by Micronet, the same team that brought us Robotica earlier in 1995. 2 months later, SSM shows off another build. They're still labeling this as being 50% done, but the screenshots show visible progress, and the magazine brings up new features. The 3 courses for Touge King are straight up inspired by real-life drift racing hotspots. They are respectively being modeled after Mount Tarumi in the Kanto region, the Hakone Turnpike, and Ikoma Skyline. It's not clear if Cave pulled an AM3 by physically traveling to these regions, but one way or another, these real-life mountain passes are being used in the game. SSM says track geometry is modeled after real public roads. though I assume they're not a carbon copy, since closed road circuits tend to not be a thing in real life. The mag says there will be at least 6 vehicles that can each be tuned up. But the real bangerino here is this update. Touge King will support up to 4 people in multiplayer. This would be unprecedented on Saturn if they actually managed to pull this off. To put this into perspective, as of this midsummer update in 1995, Grand Chaser and Gale Racer were only able to pull off 2-player split screen. Daytona USA couldn't do any split screen. 4-player? That would be nutso. In the same month, right next to its article about Tokimeki Mahjong Paradise Koi no Tenpai Beat, Saturn Fan reports Touge King as being 80% done as of July 26th. So with SSM reporting a 50% build shown at the June 1st Tokyo Toy Show, this means they jumped to 80% in about 2 months. Saturn Fan has the same deets on the tracks, along with info about a time trial mode and the coveted 4-player. They say this game should be released in October. As of August 30th, Touge King is 90% done, according to Saturn Fan. Cave is at the home stretch. But something mysteriously vanished in this update. There's no mention of a 4-player mode. In the listed features up top, they say it only goes up to 2-player split screen. It's like they forgot about it. They don't talk about taking it out or needing to make cuts. 4-player's just gone. Cave is also delaying the game's release by a month, targeting a November launch. In the same time frame, SSM is also reporting a 90% build and up to 2-player split screen. Likewise, there is no mention of the fabled 4-player mode. It just vanished. At the bottom of the page, SSM interviews an Atlas man, Shinichi Fujiki. According to Moby Games, he only worked on a handful of video games in his career. Keep in mind, Touge King has no credits. SSM credits Fujiki as, quote, development management. This article is the only piece of material that links Fujiki with Touge King.
How is the game's development coming along?
Currently, the game is pretty much done. Our focus now is on really putting our minds to work, figuring out how we can make the game fun.
So do you mean like tuning the balance of the game, that kind of thing?
Yeah, we want to make the races fun to drive in, after all.
The interview does not address what happened to the 4-player mode. It does detail their balancing act with displaying enough polygons to have a good-looking track, and not so many that it dunks the frame rate.
Have there been any challenges?
Realizing things like consecutive turns and steep inclines wasn't easy. The same could be said about the game's sense of speed, too. We also struggled with things like polygon count, but we were able to successfully solve those issues. The game ran really slow at first, too, so that aspect was also a challenge.
Fujiki talks about how they wanted to make something that stands out from the typical circuit racing games.
It seems like you can tune up the cars as well.
You can, but if you're skilled, you'll be able to win races with either a standard or tuned car. Tuning a car won't necessarily mean that it'll drive faster. It's best to tune your car to match your skills and the course.
We can see in these screenshots something that more closely resembles the final game. Beautiful skies, showing the player can race at different times of day, looking out at the lush green ridges or the lit-up city skyline at night nestled beneath the Touge.
What makes the game stand out?
I would have to say mountain road racing. Standard racing games are about racing on circuit courses, aren't they? It turned out for us that mountain roads were both non-standard courses and exactly what we were looking for.
I also noticed that the courses have details like tunnels and banners on the guardrails.
The courses in the game were modeled on real-life courses, but we tried to add our own spin to them.
In SSM's next issue, we see more screenshots showing off the close-to-final game. Car models appear to resemble real-life Touge machines, though no official licensing is seen. Striking screenshots show an incredible view at sunset. This kisses the ridgeline with a hazy orange glow. Cave is going after a visually artistic experience, paired with highly technical racing physics. This issue features an ad for Touge King, reinforcing the November release month. There's also an ad for a similar-looking 18-plus racing game from Genki called Wangan Dead Heat. You race to win the hearts of conventionally attractive models who appear in live-action FMV clips. Sure will be interesting to see how this gets localized to the Americas. The next month, Saturn Fan shows an ad saying Touge King hits shelves on November 10th. About 100 pages later, a full-spread write-up on what is now a 100% video game. This officially hit Japanese stores on the 10th for 5,800 yen. Somehow, the mags are still neglecting to mention Cave at all, just crediting Atlas as both the publisher and developer. I guess Cave is technically shown in this screenshot showing a Cave sign on the track, all crunched up by the rendering distance. Saturn Fan dives into the 3 courses, each with 2 direction options by default. They detail the 6 cars and discuss a 7th secret car, unlocked by beating each race. The Saturn Super Volume 2 demo disc has an ultra-compressed FMV briefly describing this newly released racer.
実在する峠道をベースに激しいアップダウンをフルポリゴンで表現した峠キングザ・スピリッツ。6台の車を操ってヘアピン級のカーブを走り抜けよう。ゲームは1人用、2人用、4人用、タイムトライアルの4種類がある。4人用。大樽見峠、箱根ターンパイク、生駒スカイラインなど実在の峠を元にした3つのコースから選択。プレイ中は2種類の視点を切り替えてドライビングできる。
It also fails to mention Cave.
峠を強調したレーシングゲーム峠キングザ・スピリッツ。臨場感たっぷりの興奮が君を待ってるよ。
The monthly Sega Video Magazine VHS tape is also making mention of Touge King. Unlike many Japanese-developed Saturn games, this came to North America right after it hit Japan, just 11 days apart. Stores on US soil started reporting it in stock on November 21st, though it's under a different name, High Velocity Mountain Racing Challenge. It should be noted, this came out more than a month before Japan got Saturn Sega Rally. In the States, it hit just a few days after Rally. While it's unclear if they had any obvious deadline crunch at the office, we do see a comical secret message hidden in the game's code. Quote, "Hi, come everybody. Goo, I'm sleeping goo." The two sides of the ocean would receive this in very different ways. Marketing efforts were extensive for one continent and practically non-existent for the other. The striking box art in Japan made more bland in the West. Stateside, the Japanese setting is sanded down. Reviews will mention features that don't exist, but the core gameplay remains. This is the time Japan actually let a drift racing game come out in America. Touge might be my favorite Japanese kanji. Bear with me, this is mildly amusing. Japanese writing has 3 scripts. The 46 phonetic hiragana characters, their katakana equivalents, which are typically used to write foreign words, and kanji. These more complex characters came from China. They are used for thousands upon thousands of common words and Japanese names. Kanji can be written in hiragana, but it is generally accepted that you must learn at least 2,000 kanji to fluently read Japanese. The word touge basically means mountain pass. The neat thing about this kanji is it's one of the memes where multiple other kanji are smashed together. Yama means mountain, ue means up, and shita means down. Touge is constructed from all 3, so it sort of means mountain up down. Here we have a team of shooting game developers trying to make a racing game. Birthed from the roots of spaceships and bullet dodging, having planted the roots of a beloved cult subgenre. This team is taking its experience to uncharted lands. For many of these devs, this is their first racing game, their first 3D game, and their first Sega Saturn game. On top of this, they are joining the many pioneers still carving out some kind of standard for the polygonal racing experience. If Touge King is any good, then it proves this team has extreme talent as both programmers and game devs. Technically, Toaplan dipped toes into the racing genre before, Rally Bike, though it is fundamentally a shmup. By way of a pre-render full-motion video, Atlas introduces itself. Then, Cave introduces itself through raw vibes. The avant-garde drum and bass sounds like a carpet of a bowling alley that is somehow clean. Vibes measure towards dingy yet comforting. This was meant to be played in a quiet, dark basement with enough oversized hand-me-down furniture to pass as functional. Whether you want to be or not, you are in Cave's world. A big red bar stretches across the top with a warm menu beneath. The text is in a color and style that looks like it's hard to read on purpose. A wacky 3D model of a stylized Touge kanji spins in the corner. It gets right in your face if you wait long enough. We're given the option to play through King Battle, the main one-player mode, 2-player split screen, time trial, screens showing the best times, and the options menu. A classic. That's a lot of heat. King Battle is the primary one-player campaign. It is split across the game's 3 courses. Each course has 12 heats, 6 heats in one direction, 6 in the other. The game calls them left and right. Each column of 6 has you race 2 laps against a different car, increasing in difficulty as you descend. They command you to beat all of them, becoming Japan's King of the Mountain. The 3 courses are all based on real drift racing locations, as mentioned in SSM's articles. Each course follows this formula, a set of winding turns on a mountain face, linked on both sides by a long stretch where you can flat out. The controller possessor can select one of 6 automobiles. Listen to that little vroom sound when you scroll between them. Hell yeah! Unlike Sega Rally, Cave did not get permission to use real car brands, so these thrill rides are all named by letters. That said, they appear to resemble real-life Japanese drift machines. That's because they do. My pal Malenko did some digging into the game's code, and in it, scrawling's on the cave wall, little messages and hints from the devs. They straight up list the real cars in order. Nissan Skyline GTR, Honda NSX, Subaru WRX, Mazda MX-5 Miata.
If we're talking about Miatas, do I scoff or not? I don't know what's good and what's bad with cars.
Toyota Supra, and the Mazda RX-7. Big Mazda fans over at Cave. They all have different properties, turning, braking, and drifting in their own way. There are some stats in the lower right corner, but they're too hard to read, so don't worry about them. This is not a normal racing game. It has some stank to it. Peeling back those stanky layers reveals one of the most technical and rewarding racing games in the entire Saturn library. A new player may quickly brush aside its obtuse handling and unorthodox physics. Players who stick with it will fall in love with its nuance, precision, and sense of speed. But players who grind down their times at the top level might revert back to lowering their opinion yet again, fully realizing the game's true flaws. To best describe this phenomenon to you, allow me to walk you through my recorded experience with Touge King. It starts with the North American localization and ends with the North American competition, here on High Velocity Mountain Racing Challenge. This original soundtrack blasts you right away, no punches pulled. I started in first gear, then sort of stayed in first gear. So I'm thinking, zoinks! Like, does this game force you to drive stick? Even though I lack the sufficient amount of chest hairs, I dealt with manual shift. Naturally, I tried shifting down at turns. This went well until it didn't. No gear drifting like in Sega Rally. That's fine. I guess I can just get used to this. As a wise bagman once said, the controls are stiff and slippery. In my inaugural race, I held a steady lead right up until the end of lap 2. That's fine. Race number 2. I'm understanding the finesse of its D-pad steering and braking, but it still feels uncomfy. So anyway, I beat this dude after the second race. I can tell the game wants me to drift, but each attempt slams my soul into the cold wall. Hitting a wall considerably cuts your speed, like more so than what is natural. There's no crash damage or anything, but bumps are a death blow. If you do as much as tap a guardrail, speed is instantly cut by about 100 kilometers per hour. This makes drifting a big risk. Being able to master the drift would allow you to gun through the mountain pass at remarkable speeds, but the D-pad steering just doesn't seem to get the job done. It doesn't work. I am an unhappy D-pad customer. After taking note of High Velocity's wheel compatibility, I removed the plastic crotch rocket from a dusty shelf and firmly grasp it betwixt my tree trunk thunder thighs. It is at this point when something strange and unexpected happened. I began having fun. High Velocity became good. I am lucky to not only have a wheel, but make this discovery early in my playthrough. I could have forced myself to endure countless hours of Cave's D-pad steering hell, but this thick, firm steering column which I relentlessly straddle has shown me benevolence and grace. My god, these tires have some serious grip to them. Just wanted to mention how much I love those little vroom sounds that play during the countdown. The heat menu is like a Jeopardy board. You can pick any of them in any order. I work my way down the heats of course 1, gingerly braking before each turn. Now able to competently steer.
Medium left, maybe.
Sega Rally, the Saturn game I reviewed in the previous episode, got worse with the steering wheel. Its team spent the entire development cycle tuning the warmth of D-pad steering to the point where it became better than analog wheel steering. At least in my opinion. High Velocity / Touge King is the opposite. I think Cave tried to make D-pad steering acceptable, but perhaps banked on players getting a wheel. Seriously, it's so much better with a wheel. The heats reasonably increase in difficulty on course 1. But once you get to heat 6, the challenge spikes to a hardness we expect from the likes of Cave and Toaplan. It feels as if any graze of a wall will end my chances of victory. The Heat 6 struggle went on for dozens of races. I tried switching cars. I tried cutting a huge corner by driving in the dirt. Just couldn't catch up. This is when I start to notice the brakes don't always behave the same. Sometimes they work like normal brakes, but sometimes they spastically throw my car into danger. It's like it randomly switches to the e-brake. Temporarily, I give up on Heat 6 and move on to the next column. This changes direction, having me take the same winding turns downhill, then the straightaway section uphill. At some point in the middle of the race, I mess with the C button to see if it does anything. It's another gas button, but not just any another gas button. It also changed my transmission to automatic. So I checked the instruction manual for clues. Okay, so turns out, unlike other racing games, You do not select your transmission before a race. You change it mid-race, depending on which button you press for gas. A and C both accelerate, but A accelerates in manual and C in auto. The transmission hot swaps. There are actually two types of brakes. Outside of the controls list, deeper into the paperwork, we address the business with the brake button. If you press B while not pressing gas, it acts like a normal brake. But if you press B while also pressing gas at the same time, it becomes a handbrake. This handbrake is what you're supposed to use for drifting. To shift into reverse, you have to hold Z while pressing L. I have never heard of a racing game with controls like this. It defies logic. There are 8 buttons here. Handbrakes are usually mapped to a separate button. Transmission is usually an option you select pre-race. Driving in reverse is typically not a cheat code. What? Here's the thing though. It kinda works. So what you gotta do is enter a corner at full forking speed, hit the handbrake while immediately cranking the wheel, then let off the handbrake and gas, level out your steering at the end of the corner, and exit by pressing gas. Once you have mastered this, you can zip through the mountain pass at insane speeds. High velocity / Touge King becomes fun. It all finally makes sense. We often look at 3D racing games as attempts to be racing sims. I have come to understand that Touge King isn't really a sim. It's like, I don't know, it's like a video game. So I work my way down the column, skip Heat 6 again, and move on to Course B, based on Hakone. I start to realize the graphical artistry in play here. These courses, and the environments which encase them, are stitched together beautifully. Caveat though, it runs at 20 frames per second. Ideally, a console 3D racing game would run at around 30 FPS, but 20 is not terrible. As mentioned in the SSM interview with Atlas, this balance allows them to really stretch the draw distance. You don't see pop-in that often. The car is seen moving between pine trees, infrastructure, small towns, gas stations, bridges, billboards, forests, rock faces, and cliff sides, peering into a mountain-high view of the valleys beneath. These skies change to different times of day. A vivid sunset brushes the ridgeline with an orange glow. By night, cities light up the landscape like a planetarium. I like how in Course 1, the supportive kawaii girl stands at the finish line just to cheer you on. Hell yeah. This beautiful reflection of Japanese mountains at times reminds me of the satellite views we get of these places in the modern day. Type B, the Honda NSX, has the best drifting. I won't be taking questions about this. Armed with the NSX, I return to Course A left Heat 6. I know the corners, and I have a good feel for the physics. To echo Yoshio Fujimoto,
I know everything. Very much confidence.
Through many attempts, two things would happen. I would either reset the race early after setting an unsatisfactory pace, or I'd get a good start that would end with the enemy crushing me in lap 2. Sometimes they smack me from behind, causing me to lose it and hit a wall. In Heat 6, a wall hit is death. You can mentally split these tracks into 2 halves, each requiring different brakes. The straightaway section does not require drifts, just well-timed steering relying on the incredible tire grip. Wheel required. Occasionally, you need to press standard brakes. In the winding half, you must use the e-brake to drift through red corners. After about 20 minutes of resets, I start an incredible run. At the end of lap 2, bad drifting causes me to wall hit. I figured I was done for. Then, the enemy hit me in a straightaway, giving me a boost. Not ideal, but I'll take it. At the final turn, I hit a wall again. This surely must mean I'm done for. Psych! With just a few frames to spare, I finally attain total victory at Heat 6. It's an exhilarating feeling. This instilled within me the bones required to power through the rest of the game. Everything just clicked. The crown is as good as mine. I will rule the mountain. The rest of Course B's challenges did not beat me up too badly, despite the course being way more difficult. Hakone's recreation really puts you through the trenches of Touge. These tight drift corners are densely packed together. Track memorization is a hard requirement. Thankfully, the computer rivals are also not very good at this course. The drift section here ends with a looping hairpin that sends you back into the track from the other direction. Then you must take the correct turn at the intersection indicated by a line of white arrows on the road. This straightaway section's excellent. Shout out to that Atlas petrol station. Little details like these dashed lines at hairpins reflect real life. We see these notes in the tapes of Touge racing in Hakone. We don't know if Cave visited these locations while deving the game, Sega Rally style. At the very least, they were inspired by reality. Course C is meant to overlook the Ikoma skyline. I like the toll booths at the start. Drift sections peer across the city, ending with a tunnel that takes you straight into town. Get a load of the arches over the roads, the buildings towering above, and this hard right-angle turn. This corner's real tough, but when you nail it, the knots in your back will noticeably loosen. This is the only track where corners that require drifting exist beyond the marked red lines. It is by far the most dynamic and, in my opinion, the best course in the game. I love this track. If you spend time learning high velocity, you eventually get to the point where the first 4 heats are just cake. Heat 5, sort of hard. Heat 6, actually hard, but manageable. A few hours into this groove, I beat all 36 heats. There is no fanfare to beating the game. You simply exist in Cave's world. What you do in it is your choice. But there is a reward, if you can find it. When you beat all 36 heats, this appears on the track when you replay Course 1 Left Heat 1. Slam right into this sad sack, and this happens. Behold, Type G. Totally not a Porsche. This thing can motor quite severely. With its sleek shape and pointy spoiler, G totally cooks. Just full send. Talk about worthy stats for a hard-to-unlock secret car. The Perma Super Flame Arch of Touge King. After several races with my prize, I thought my time playing high velocity had essentially stopped. But while scouring the scarce info about Cave's first racer, I found this on the Japanese Wikipedia page. When you unlock the Porsche, a song by Japanese pop singer Linda Yamamoto plays in the background. This did not happen in high velocity, so I assumed it must only be in the Japanese version of the game, Touge King. So I did what any reasonable person would do. I played the entire game again with the Japanese copy. Before I could even restart, Malenko easily found the song in the Japanese game's files. It's her hit single, Doni mo Tomaranai. What's fun is this song is in the options menu, so you can play it anytime you want. The song does indeed play when you unlock the Porsche. There's a distinct vibe to enjoying Touge King with Yamamoto's smash hit as the background music. This exists pre-Eurobeat taking over this genre. Drift racing tunes in its purest form. It's not clear why Doni mo Tomaranai by Linda Yamamoto was erased from the North American version. Maybe there were copyright issues. Maybe they got licensing for Touge King but didn't want to do it for High Velocity since no American would really recognize this. Or perhaps they thought Americans would get upset at a non-English song. I don't know. Then again, the American manual straight up says this game is based on Japanese mountain racing. They even left kanji on some of the road signs. Linda's absence from Western soil remains a mystery. This, combined with the current day price difference, is reason enough to buy Touge King instead of High Velocity. This second playthrough was wickedly entertaining. Going through the entire game while knowing how to make the physics sing felt vindicating. It made me feel like a real Drift King. It also gave me time to really notice the little details. Signs and hot air balloons pimping the devs and publisher, shops and other buildings next to drop-off cliffs, the various towns and tiny villages. Hakone has a ski lift that moves above the track, and dirt ramps for runaway trucks. The little fake ads on these billboards are pretty neat. Some fake water bottle company and a spaghetti restaurant are plastered in Hakone. I guess the restaurant is by the Atlas gas station? I couldn't find it. Ikoma is rich with these fun details, like the statue up top, several billboards, and the many buildings in town. Check this out. At the right angle turn, the building has a sign that says, "Turn the corner, King." Welcome words of encouragement. Love the Ferris wheel and the toll booths. Did I mention the toll booths? I think I did. They're dope. These little buildings above the tunnel entrance appear to be too short for regular-sized people, so that's kind of funny. This billboard for Cave mild cigarettes is especially noteworthy. On the American High Velocity, they changed it to a weird-looking ad for Gale's Pop. I guess they didn't want a fake cigarette ad in the American game. High Velocity received a kids to adults rating from the ESRB. It's the E for everyone equivalent at the time. Imagery of tobacco products is listed under the rating board's guidelines, so Atlas likely had to get rid of Cave Mild to make it kid-friendly in the West. Japan's rating system didn't seem to care. Touge King has a super in-depth replay mode. It lets you scroll through several camera angles and allows you to replay certain sections of the track. You can toggle the HUD in case you want a natural view of your race. This sunset skybox could potentially be influenced by their past work. Personally, it reminds me of the Game Over screen from Toaplan's Rally Bike. One major thing I noticed in my second go-around: the computer opponents appear to be on rails. There's really no AI. They don't think. Instead, it looks like they take the same set path for their own heat. I started to notice it in this Course 3 race. At the beginning, the opposing car rams me. I had to reset a lot, and each time, it rammed me again and again. I decided to start the race slowly and let the rival pull way ahead. It did the same slam at the same spot, even though I'm not there. I'm not even close. It's also noticeable at Course 2. At the 180 hairpin, there's that brief moment where you drive in the opposite direction. If you run head-on into the opponent here, nothing happens. The collision sound plays, but neither of you really get shoved anywhere. The opponent just stays on its rail. Two-player works okay enough. Instead of lowering the draw distance to keep it at 20 frames per second, they just let both sides load all the polygons like normal. This runs somewhere at around 15 or 16 frames per second. You can choose horizontal or vertical orientation. Horizontal makes the track harder to see. Vertical does this weird thing where the two cars share the same camera when they're close together, then the screen splits when they're far enough apart. It's a nice effect, but it's not super functional. Sharing a screen makes controlling the car a more awkward time. Touge King is impressive when stacked against its contemporaries. In this world of mid-November 1995, Sega Rally just came out for the American Saturn. Alongside this dynamic pair are Cyber Speedway, the Port of Daytona, and Time Warner Interactive's Virtua Racing. At just 20 frames per second, Touge runs slower than Rally's 30. It is closer to the inconsistent frame rates of Cyber Speedway, Daytona, and VR. No, I'm not comparing this to Gale Racer, just stop. Still, its expansive view of the beautiful tracks really set Cave's Racer apart from the pack. While Rally put extensive effort into reflecting the small details of its real-life counterpart, Touge puts in many touches of artistry. It's not necessarily going after realism, rather, it's going after being a cool-looking video game. This thing oozes in style, an ooze which coats its extraordinarily technical gameplay. Will the reviewers see it that way? Touge King the Spirits / High Velocity Mountain Racing Challenge is misunderstood. The video game press largely missed the point, as it is so often accused of doing. While some critics dug deep into its sick drifts and wicked artistry, others clearly did not spare enough playtime, brushing it off as alright, shoving its devs back into the cave from whence they emerged without giving them the time of daylight. This never came out in Europe, yet many European magazines reviewed it. Perhaps they thought it was going to come out in Europe, since they usually get Saturn games months after their initial release. Though Sega Power UK hedged its bets correctly in its review of King of Spirits. Quote, "I boldly predict this game will never be available in Europe. This game is ours." Sega Power goes on a roast fest, accusing Atlas of lackluster quality control, saying this is to Sega Rally what a Mad Chimp crayon scribble is to the Sistine Chapel. They bash the cars for being unlicensed, wobbly video game things, and believe the frame rate is around 7 or 8 frames per second. It's 20. The reviewer did not take the time to get used to the controls or read the manual, evidenced by its misunderstanding of how the brake system works. They shiv King of Spirits with a 19% rating, including Hobwash in its list of downers. No uppers here. Quote, "Puts Daytona's fault into perspective. KOS, sick, is the worst console racing game I've ever played. Ever." Saturn Plus was a little more forgiving. They too are unable to read the kanji for mountain up-down, though their naming of King the Spirits is at least more accurate. It starts out by praising Japanese devs for their skills at deving, but apparently thinks they can't get the names of games right. The writers believe it's not as good as Rally and Daytona, though they like its handling, gushing over how hard you can whip it around hairpins. They found the e-brake. Saturn Plus also notes the graphics, scribing glowing remarks for its environments. At the end, it says they expect the game to release in Europe later in 1996, though no details of a PAL version were released at the time. They recommend importing it. Again, this never came out in Europe. Over in the US, GameFan's 3 reviewers gave it scores hovering around 80%. The trio notes its nearly pop-up free 3D, well-designed tracks, and fun physics. I believe the 3 actually gave this game a pretty fair shot, though they agree, it is eclipsed by Rally. Tough competition. Unlike Saturn Fan, GameFan does not like its environments. And unlike what's actually in the final game, GameFan says it has a 4-player mode.
What?
Inquirer says, and I quote, "There's even a 4-player mode." So they only provide one screenshot in this review, and it's 1-player mode. I went ahead and checked the other paperback critic reviews of the time, across all regions. From what I can find, only GameFan mentions 4-player. Why though? Earlier in this exhaustingly long video about an unheard of racing game from the armpit of the 90s, I went over Japanese articles previewing the game. They at one point said it will have 4-player split screen. Closer to Touge King's launch, this was rolled back to just 2-player. Devs noted a need to balance things out to keep an acceptable frame rate. Devs frequently send magazine reviewers early builds of their nearly complete games, hoping their review gets published when the game comes out. So, something happened. The people over at Hidden Palace did get a slightly early build of High Velocity in its Project Deluge Fat Stack. It has October 27th written on the disc. The game came out in the States on November 21st. Typically, Hidden Palace will put these up for download, but the homies there say this is an exact match of the final build. Could GameFan's review copy be even earlier? It very well could be, and that's because 4-player is in the final game. Bobales is a well-known hacker in the Saturn scene. He finds all sorts of hidden features across games, like the Cut Versus mode in Burning Rangers, hidden costumes in Fighting Vipers, things like that. After digging around in High Velocity, Bo noticed something odd with how the main menu options are addressed in the code. King Battle is written as 00, Versus Battle as 01, Time Trial as 02, then Ranking as 04. It skips 03. So what happens if you force the game to take in 03 as being selected? Well, this happens. The 4-player mode. After making this incredible find, he created a patch for High Velocity that enables 4-player. Now anyone can try this out. The patch reroutes you to the 4-player mode when you select options. Car select is split 4 ways, letting each player pick from one of the default cars and colors. There's no GUI showing you info about the drift machines. While this hidden mode gives you the option of selecting a course, it always defaults to this small, somewhat circular NASCAR track. Definitely looks like a test track. And man, even with this small course, the game's performance drops real low in 4-player. I can see why this was cut. Virtual highlight joke, am I right, gamers? There's also no GUI in this test track, and the race seems to just go on forever. At one point, the game crashed when I got into a head-on collision. When you quit a race, it still supports replay mode and its camera angles. This gives us a scary view of what the bottom of the skybox looks like. So all this brings that GameFan write-up into question. If they really did get a 4-player mode, did they play it? Was it just this one test track? Did their build have a more complete 4-player experience? Did Atlas send them an outdated document about the game's features? Maybe GameFan didn't actually play it at all. We for sure know one thing. Cave absolutely tried to put 4-player in Touge King. They got pretty far into implementing the mode, likely deciding that it's just not worth wrestling with the frame rate. For a third-party polygonal Saturn game in 1995, having 4-player split screen at all is a pretty big accomplishment. We saw Sega struggle to get any split screen in its 3D games. They couldn't do it in Daytona, and Nextech only got 2 in Grand Chaser. The CS team did get it working for Rally, with some environmental sacrifices to keep a steady 30 frames per second. It's curious that a game which only loads 2 cars per race in its campaign is remotely capable of doing any 4-player split screen. This even predates... Hang on a minute. Should I go there? Do I dare tempt the hard-lined parishioners of this church? No. Pick your battles, as they say, We have seen foursomes in the past, with Street Racer and Top Gear 3000, but even on sprite machines, it was uncommon. If you want to be an uber nerd, we can talk about Extreme Racing on the Amiga. It does 4-way split screen on one console. If you connect it to a second Amiga, it can apparently support 8 players. Cool! Later on in the Saturn's lifespan, the sprite-based port of Street Racer would support 8-player split screen on one monitor. 4-way splits in a mid-90s 3D racer is rare. They probably could have gone full send as an extra feature just to flaunt. But if it kept crashing like this during development, it probably wouldn't pass QA. Still, a technical achievement. Both Bobales and Malenko showed me this Atlas splash screen hidden in the code, seemingly unused. The FMV shows a jack-o'-lantern mascot presenting the logo. At first, we assume this must be something that plays on Halloween, but setting the internal clock to October 31st did not trigger this. So it turns out, this is Jack-O-Lantern, a demon from Shin Megami Tensei. He got pretty popular, and we can see, Homeboy was put in a lot of installments. Twitter user Warue spoke about how there was some talk of using Jack-O-Lantern as an Atlas mascot. We can even see him on one of their buildings.
Fun fact.
In an SSM issue, the writers revealed this cheat code, enabling the semi-truck. Despite its significant stature, this thing can drift, baby. This reminds me of that one scene from King of the Hill where they take a broken down semi down a winding hill backwards in neutral, and Boomhauer stood at the back door using walkie-talkies to give directions to Hank in reverse, and then they earn the trucker's respect in the end. Except the truck is working and you're driving it forwards like normal, and there aren't any King of the Hill characters present.
Fun fact.
There are also cheat codes to force the race into the time of day of your choosing. I think the same skyboxes are used across all tracks.
Fun fact.
Touge King is compatible with the mission stick. The analog steering actually works on this thing.
That one wasn't bad.
What sucks is you have to shift gears by moving the stick up and down, so it's kind of terrible.
Fun fact.
Touge King is compatible with the Saturn Shuttle Mouse. This thing gives you full analog steering. It kind of works in a messed up way. Why did they do this?
Sega Rally Championship.
Okay, let's go, Sega Rally. Kasuta kotiin nyt. Pääse ajamassa Selika ja Lancia. Monta eri rata. Yeah! Let's go!
3, 2, 1, go! Easy right.
Hey, katso Häkkinen.
Long, easy right, maybe. Fun fact.
Touge King is not compatible with the 3D control pad. Some Saturn racers that came out before this controller were forwards compatible, using it to emulate the steering wheel, but this does not work in Touge. German reviewers seem to give it the most in-depth whack, with what I perceive to be fair ratings at the bottom. Funny that European magazines were really into this, even though Europe never got Touge King. The American Next Generation magazine says mostly good things, but criticizes the game for only having one computer opponent. I think this is unfair, since the game attempts to recreate the experience of one-on-one Touge racing. Many drift racing games after it would do the same. What can be criticized are CPUs that never dog you. They never make a real effort to block you, react to your moves, or crash you, since they're on rails. They do ramming motions, but it's all preset. You are racing against a train. Does this mean the game works with the train controller? If you go into this wanting it to be a racing sim, you might have a slightly ungood time. But if you learn what makes it tick, this becomes a thrill ride. It's not that Cave modeled Touge King after their shmup formula. Rather, the design elements of their shmups lend themselves to racing games. To become good at Batsugun and DonPachi, you need to memorize a lot of their bullet patterns. You must develop your own way of consistently moving through the enemy fire. In Touge King, you must also memorize patterns to succeed, developing your way of consistently moving through its courses. With repetition, you learn how to properly tackle corners. They become second-hand, like threading the needle through a boss's bullet swarm. Artisans at Toaplan and Cave became very good at the fundamentals of going through things, lightning-fast decision-making, and using the right ship, or car, for your playstyle. They managed to naturally transition these fundamentals to racing games. It became clear to me their background is why Touge King is good. It's also why Touge King is hard, and for many players, unapproachable. Many good arcade games are easy to start, yet tough to master. Cave's bullet hell games and Touge King are not easy to start, but when you master them, the payoff is euphoric. But does it pay off for Cave? Weekly Famitsu diligently tracked sales data throughout the 90s, continuing that effort to this very day. Right when Touge King came out in Japan, it charted at number 3 on Famitsu's November 12th data, only beaten by Beyond the Beyond and Romancing Saga 3. In its first 3 weeks, Cave's Racer wound up selling about 25,000 copies to the Nippon. The Slammer Saturn Racers squashed this number. Rally pushed 120,000 in that time frame, and Daytona USA sent about 100,000. But Touge King's first 3 weeks did beat Cyber Speedway and Gale Racer. I could not find Famitsu's records on Time Warner Interactive's Virtua Racing. As for the high-velocity localization, I cannot find its sales data. In 1995, Daytona and Rally sold way less in the US than in Japan. There is also a low amount of high-velocity copies on eBay, telling me it might not be super common. They probably didn't print a ton of copies. Let's dig less deep and go back to the surface level. Judging this book by its cover, the marketing effort for High Velocity was just bad. Sega of America is known for making a few dumpy covers. But this, yeesh. We got this cartoony Honda Accord-ass looking errand runner going through what looks like a children's book. And the name. Have I given this grief yet? High Velocity Mountain Racing Challenge. Can we at least make an attempt to advertise the fact that this is a Japanese street racing game? Maybe try something like Mountain Dominator. Peep the Japanese cover. This nods to the Kino Sunset Skybox, showing 2 amped-up streetcars in a heated race. It's not outstanding, but they at least tried to make this sellable. Where the f*** is the homie who made the Off-World Interceptor Extreme cover? The marketing blitz in the US was anything but. Hardly a peep about High Velocity in the gaming press, outside of critical reviews. Though I did find this promo in an EGM issue. Peep this. Quote, "Either way, you're gonna scream." It's a cross-platform combo ad for 2 Atlas-published games, Saturn's High Velocity and PlayStation's Space Griffin VF9. By the look of the screenshots, whoever's playing might not know they're supposed to shift gears if using the A button to accelerate. You're going for the title in these unsanctioned events, where speed and timing are the ultimate tests of your driving skills. Buckle up and scream down the tracks in some of the hottest cars this side of Detroit. Detroit? Okay.
We're not Detroit!
High Velocity is mentioned one time in Sega's FY97 report. It shows High Velocity 2 is planned for a November 1996 release in North America, but this never came out. Touge King 2 would instead stay locked in Japan. Like its predecessor, Touge 2 is a Saturn exclusive. Unlike its predecessor, Touge 2 is a major overhaul. Same concept, but the graphical style and driving mechanics are super different, feeling more like a racing sim. It's still fun, and is perhaps more accessible to beginners. Wall hits don't kill you in this game, but it never came out in the West. Later that decade, Cave moved the Touge series to the PlayStation. Its third installment, Touge Max, did get localized to the West as Peak Performance. Here we have another case of cover hell. Japan's cover, normal, shows it's a street racing game. Slightly Kino background with an elegant sense of speed. Jureno Panda-ass headlights. Europe's cover, trippy. A slime blast of color. Frozen crash zoom of a Porsche or whatever the heck car this is. But wait, it gets better. American cover. I am not f***ing with you. This is not a joke. It's a Chevy NASCAR truck. This is actually the American cover. I don't even think they got Chevy's sponsorship or anything. There is a stock racing pickup truck in the game with no Chevy logo, but like, man, imagine buying this as like a kid or whatever, thinking you're getting a NASCAR truck game, but it's this. Anyway, the series hit a high note with Touge Max G on PS1, released only to Japan in 2000. Would recommend. Let's circle back to the cancelled High Velocity 2. People in the Saturn scene often ask, why did Japan get so many games that never came out in the US? The PS1 got a ton of localizations from Japan. Ditto with the N64. Why not Saturn? Many like to say it's because Sega of America leaders were somehow anti-2D, anti-RPG, and anti-anime. While they did have a very clear preference for 3D, there is not a lot of meat to back up this general notion. Sure, there's a few quotes here and there that imply this, but I think High Velocity is a microcosm for the real reason so many games did not get localized on Saturn. It's simple. It seems to be in line with sales numbers. In 1995 and some of 1996, the US and Europe received many of the Saturn games produced in Japan. This pipeline from Japan to the US shrunk significantly throughout late 96 and 97. When we talk about being perplexed by Japanese Saturn games not coming out in the States, pretty much all the go-to examples were released after mid-96. Console sales in the US were swiftly defeated by the PlayStation practically right away in late 95. The fiscal report shows a push to bring the US Saturn back up to snuff in the first half of 96, but this just did not work. Sales were not ideal. Localizing Japanese games to the States became a financial risk, with killer first-party games not meeting expectations. High Velocity was such a strange choice to localize when you compare it to what we did not get from Japan. But so are other 1995 games. Clearly, SOA wanted High Velocity 2. Hardly any translation required, so localizing would be a bird-in-hand effort. But someone decided even this is not worth the risk, be it Sega or Atlas. They saw the data, the low sales numbers, and pulled the plug. Same thing happened to the roughly 100 other canceled games listed in this document. Get a load of this early 96 SSM issue. The magazine writers decided to take a road trip to every location Touge King is based on. They even took pictures. Look at how happy the gang looks. This doesn't have further insight into development, but it's pretty cool that they did this. In the modern age of retro video game enjoying, Touge King hardly gets any attention. It generated a small amount of buzz on Usenet when it came out, got its magazine reviews, then crept back into the shadowy cave. For the longest time, one of the few gameplay videos on YouTube was someone who clearly used the A button to accelerate without realizing they were supposed to shift gears. The whole race is stuck in first gear. Other than a handful of long plays and a couple of legitimately good time trial runs from Japanese players, this was a pretty underground racing game. Until recently. The Shiro Gang hosted a month-long community challenge, beckoning Sega fans to compete for top times in Touge King 1 and 2. Right courses had to use stock settings, while left courses allowed customization. You can see many of us busted out the wheel for this one. Some went hard on setup, using things like bungee cords and tape, wheels were firmly strapped into chairs and milk crates. One person got out the clamps, fastening the wheel to a slanted mount in front of their PVM. Yep, that thing isn't going anywhere. As for me, I played this the way God intended. Steering wheel on the bed, no clamps, right in my crotch. For the first chunk of the challenge, ya boy was doing pretty well. I didn't really talk about time trial that much. Naturally, the community challenge got me into it. I love how much time data this shows you. Courses are split into checkpoints, and you get to see individual times for each checkpoint throughout your run. Lap times are also compared. Once you set a time, it will tell you how under or over you are from your personal best. If you beat a checkpoint time, this little sound chirps at you. If you're under time, you get a neutral sounding beep. While annoying at first, the Yahoos proved helpful when returns began to diminish. What's actually annoying is how much real estate the timer takes up. It's a little distracting. Grinding out times allowed me to really respect how well designed these courses are. This journey got me to inch closer and closer to the corner, hating the walls more than ever before. Resetting after every hit. Wall hits are devastating in time trial. The hardest track to master was Hakone, Course B. Unlike the other two courses, each tightly packed hairpin requires its own approach for an optimal run. Joe, Dubdime, and I went back and forth on this one for a while, loving every moment we got to cruise past the Atlas petrol station, resetting often at any hint of a mistake. We sought perfection, paired with a frame-perfect start. So if your needle's right about here when the countdown ends, you get a boost, Mario Kart style. This is done by pressing gas right before the number 1 on the countdown. It has to be frame perfect. Frustrating, since once you discover it, your runs start to look like this. Yeah. I don't know if anyone has ever publicly grinded down the times this far. It was an incredible experience to be a part of this, and to watch our community optimize a game that nobody plays. By the end of the month, Sega Steve discovered that Type E, with its rare 6th gear, is by far the fastest car. It's also nearly impossible to drive. Trying to drift with this thing is like controlling a runaway tank on shopping cart wheels. By the end, he cranked out an unbeatable time on Course A. It was a time no other vehicle could possibly beat. This was frustrating for everyone who spent time with Type B. Type B has the best drifting, but a significantly slower speed than Type E. It became apparent that E is the best car. You just have to figure out how to drift with it. To get what are truly the top times, one must master Type E's near impossible drift handling. I tried for days and days to get good with E, but I just kept bashing my skull against the fucking wall. It is at this point when something strange and unexpected happened. I stopped having fun. Enjoyability in Touge King has a gradual build-up, then a plummet back to the bottom. Starting out with no skills, the fun factor is weak, but once you learn its mechanics and land sick drifts, the fun builds and builds. Then you begin to realize just how much monotonous repetition is involved with maxing out your skills. How much the flaws in these physics get in the way of the true skill ceiling. What was once thought of as a harder difficulty feels like bad game design. No amount of finesse with Type E's drifts seem to work. It's almost luck-based, or at least nearly frame-perfect. At its highest skill level, Touge King requires excessive precision. By the end of the month, the rest of the chart became dominated by Joe, who went back to Type B. No one else, not even Steve, was able to blast Type E through the other courses. We just couldn't do it. July concluded with Joe and his NSX crowned King of the Mountain. he had the most wins of any player. Each winner got these cool patches. One thing we couldn't figure out. What the hell does the narrator say when you get a record time? Most of us think it's a Japanese dev saying it's perfect, but with an accent. It sounds off. Here's what it sounds like slowed down. Well, not necessarily perfect. Touge King as a whole is impressive. It really is an underdog within an already underdog console library. You never hear anyone talk about it. You never see anyone play it. You never witness it get praised by fans. It just exists. Likewise, players of Touge King simply exist in its world. You can race any heat, track, or car you want at any given point. Master the controls, bolt through hairpins at lightning speed, and maybe someday become royalty, earning the mountain's crown. Chairman Segata is impressed by its incredible draw distance, art style, and sense of speed. Though it's hard on beginners and has a rough frame rate, this stands out among the other Saturn racers, proving to be an incredible 3D effort for a third party in 1995. To get the most out of this game, you need a wheel, or at least some way to emulate the analog wheel. This is a larger barrier to entry than most Saturn racing games, but once you blast past those walls, your senses will become glued to the sensation of sick drifts. When you start to nail those hairpins, it becomes intoxicating, an adrenaline rush akin to threading clouds of bullets. Just don't try too hard to get good at it. Cave went on to make many a shmup. It is perhaps what they are best known for. But this side foray into 3D racing games did go on for a little while. It bled into a snowboarding game for Saturn, a late release for the console that I will probably review in about 40 years. With help from Nextech, Cave would end its racing genre run in the 6th gen with Touge R, spending much of the thousands making celebrated bullet-held gems. You've probably heard of Mushihime-sama, Death Smiles, and Espgaluda. DonPachi kept going for some time. They made many installments. Cave dominated this genre, becoming a household name for shooting games, key inspiration for many others. Nowadays, their dominance seems to be sunsetting, hardly putting out any meaningful new software, willingly letting modern-day ports expire from digital storefronts. No matter what happens, their catalog withstands. A team born from the ashes of Toaplan, breaking ground in a niche universally loved by its cult. There's nothing anyone can do to stop Cave's legacy.
大ヒット曲華やかなステージをお楽しみください。山本リンダさん、どうにも止まらない。
噂も信じちゃいけないよ。私の心は運なのさ。いつでも楽しい夢を見て生きているのが好きなのさ。真っ赤なバラ踊り器量のいいことを踊ろうかそれとも優しいあの人に熱い心をあげよう赤ちゃんは
本で作られた女性雀士たちとリアルな麻雀が楽しめる麻雀海岸物語。
Pebble Beach Golf.
Truxton, Truxton, other games that aren't Truxton suck.
Doesn't matter when it's done. There'll be at least 212 more episodes this lifetime. Period, cut, and dry. Whichever ones aren't sure, it'll be 8 hours long. Next. Any reason there were no interviews today? Couldn't get any. Next. Was mispronouncing Project Deluge done on purpose for a joke? What do you care? If you read 11,700 words, you've messed one up too. Next.
Yeah, so moving forward, does this mean we can expect to see Mike Ditka coming back as a recurring character?
Yes. Next. Not a very good bit, is it? No? Alright, I'll see you guys later.